Good morning. I'd like to start the meeting of the Wicomico County Council Legislative Session, and we can start with opening prayer for those who would like to start, and the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, and power, and the glory forever. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, need a motion to approve the consent item and a second, with the exception of open work session minutes from December 17th, 2019, involving the Human Resources Director.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. All right, Ms. Hurley, we have a proclamation recognizing the National Mentoring Month. Big Brothers and Big Sisters. If we could have Jessica Mims, the Executive Director, and Erica Dennis come to the podium, please.
The proclamation for National Mentoring Month. Whereas during National Mentoring Month, we celebrate the dedicated men and women who volunteer their time, talents, and resources to mentor, teach, and empower young people and those in need of guidance. And as whereas mentors come from diverse backgrounds and improve the lives of America's youth, helping them grow into responsible adults. And whereas in Wicomico County and across our country, mentors serve not only as role models for young people, but also as an inspiration of big dreams and pursuit of any goal, regardless of their circumstance. And whereas these acts of generosity and compassion are remembered that each of us has a deeper purpose, and that we can make a positive difference in the lives of young people. Now, therefore, in recognition of the numerous contributions made by mentors in Wicomico County, be it resolved by the Wicomico County Council that January 2020 is hereby proclaimed National Mentoring Month. This is done the 21st day of January 2020. For Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Wicomico County.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all the commissioners. I want to thank the community. I see so many people here that support Big Brothers, Big Sisters, including the Shorebirds and the partnership with the Board of Education. We actually work with all 9 counties of the Eastern Shore, and I like to talk about how wonderful Wicomico County is because all the service organizations work together so much and we have so much support. So we're honored to be housed right here in Salisbury. And I'd love Erica to talk a little bit more about the programming since she works directly with the children every day.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. Last year, we were able to serve over 600 youth, and we serve them through mentoring in schools, mentoring in the community. We have a program that works with children who are affected by incarceration. We're able to provide sponsorships for their families, so we cover them between the ages of 6 and 16 years old, actually 18 years old, in a variety of ways, and we support the family as well as the youth. And so we're just so happy to be able to continue that work in this community. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a great community in Wicomico County, and it's because of organizations like Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Hurley.
Good morning, Mr. President, council members, ladies and gentlemen. I do have a couple of housekeeping matters to go over with before we begin. The first is the proposed legislation to prohibit marijuana in public areas is not on the agenda today. Our attorney is currently reviewing the draft bill and researching the matter, so please keep an eye on that for a future meeting. The other item is per the county executive's request, the work session to discuss the audit request on the Newland Park landfills, useful life enclosure and post-closure costs will not be held today. Looking at the agenda, the first item for business is a public hearing on resolution number 06-2020 to close a westerly portion of Culver Road. A public hearing notice was posted on the county's website and published in the Daily Times, stating that a public hearing would be held this morning at 10 a.m. And we do have Mr. Dallas Baker here, Director of Public Works, if there are any questions.
Okay, I'd like to open the floor to public hearing. If anyone has any comments they would like to make, please go to the podium, state your name, county of residence, and provide your comment. No comments? Do we have any comments from the county council? All right, no comments. Do I have a motion to approve resolution number 06-2020?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of resolution number 06-2020, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes.
Next is a public hearing on resolution number 07-2020, approving a deed of easement between Wicomico County, Maryland and Delmarva Power and Light Company for property located on the east side of Walston Switch Road. Again, a public hearing notice was posted on the county's website and published in the Daily Times, stating that a public hearing would be held this morning at 10 a.m.
All right, I'd like to open the floor again for public hearing. If anyone has any comments they would like to make, come to the podium, state your name, county of residence, and your concern. No comments. That concludes the public hearing. Do I have a motion for resolution 07-2020?
So moved. Second.
Do I have a second? Any discussion?
Mr. President,
Yes,
may I have one?
I'm sorry.
That's okay with Delmarva Power. Just here, Lori Van Hoy with Delmarva Power, just here in case you had any questions.
Thank
Same with
you.
Will Carpenter from McCormick Taylor.
All right, any discussion?
I do that.
Yes,
I had
sir.
a lot of questions when Dallas and
Yeah, we do.
Weston was in front of us, and those questions were answered, and I want to thank them for looking into it and getting everything squared away. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holloway.
Any more questions?
President Dodd, I'd like to just take a moment to thank Mr. Fitzgerald, the President of the Board of Education, and Dr. Hanlon and her staff for being here. We appreciate you taking the time to come. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, you got a motion?
Yeah, I got a motion. All in favor? Say aye.
Can we clarify who the motion was made by?
I'm sorry.
Can we just clarify, okay, Mr. McCain made the motion?
I seconded it.
And
Yeah.
Mr. Holloway
All right, we got that?
Thank you. We didn't hear it on this end of the table. I
Okay, sorry.
apologize.
I'll try to announce it when I see who does it. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes.
Okay, next is
Yes,
a
sir.
public hearing on the capital improvement program for the county for the period of July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2025, and the capital budget for fiscal year 2021. There is a typo on the agenda. That date shows fiscal year 2020. It should be fiscal year 2021. Mr. President, with your permission, I'll read each department and the totals through fiscal year 25.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, there are copies of the CIP summary page on the table as you walk in, if anybody wants to follow along. Starting with general services, it's $993,000. Information technology, $257,250. Sheriff's office is $10,189,500. Department of Corrections, $913,800. Department of Public Works Engineering Division, it's $4,091,450. Board of Education, $13,256,000. Warwick Community College, $6,364,991. Public library is $7,005,100. Public health is $897,000. Public Works Roads Division is $6,400,000. Airport is $33,165,861. Recreation and Parks is $1,591,000. Civic Center is $1,700,000. Public Works Solid Waste Division is $8,110,000. Tourism is $163,000. The total capital project cost through fiscal year 2025 is $95,097,952.
Okay. I'd like to open the floor for public hearing. If anyone has any comments they would like to make, please come to the podium, state your name, county of residence, and your comment.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I feel like this is deja vu, but I'll go through all the proper procedures. My name is Michelle Wright, and I live in Hebron, Maryland. And I thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts and concerns about the renovation project at Mardella Middle and High School being pulled from the capital improvement plan. And I'm looking around and I don't see anybody here from the county executive's office, so I'm very disappointed in that as well, since this is his plan. I stand here before you again, still wearing my 3 hats. First, I'm a resident of Wicomico County, and I live in the Mardella School District, and a proud parent of 2 children that attended and graduated from Mardella High School. Secondly, I was appointed by the governor, and I was honored to serve on the Wicomico County Board of Education as a board member, vice president, and president for 6 years starting in 2006. My 3rd hat is I am currently serving on the Wicomico Education Foundation, which shows my continued support for our educational system. But please know that I am not speaking on behalf of that group. There are many words that come to mind as I think about the decision by our county executive, Mr. Culver, to remove Mardella Middle and High School renovation funding from the capital improvement plan for the 2nd year in a row that you will be discussing today. Those words are worried, concerned, disappointed, angry, surprised, but optimistic, proactive, strong, high expectations, and forward thinking. On Tuesday, January the 7th, 2020, I attended a work session at the Board of Education to hear the educational specification presentation that was completed by a committee made up of teachers, students, community reps, Becker Morgan, and Board of Ed staff, and I served on that committee. The committee met twice a month, September through December. This important part of the process was planned after Mr. Culver added the project back to the CIP after pulling it spring of 2019. That same morning, I contacted Mr. Culver's office in an effort to make sure that the CIP was being submitted on time to the county council and that Mardella was on schedule with county funding. I received a response quickly, which did not, and I repeat, did not, state that Mardella had been removed from the CIP, though the CIP was dated December 17, 2019. Later that day, I received a call from a friend to notify me that they had heard that Mardella had been pulled. After a couple of days and several phone calls, I was able to confirm that this was true. My feelings at that time were the disappointment, angry, concerned, and worried, but I'm not surprised, because we are dealing with a person that has a proven history of pulling the plug on school projects dating back to at least 2012. I want to make sure that everyone understands that a project such as this takes 5 to 10 years from start to finish. We can't wait 5 to 10 years for our kids to get a school that they so desperately need. And right now, the current CIP does not have any funding for Mardella for the next 5 years. So we're talking 5 to 10 years after that. It is stated in the executive's cover letter dated December 16, 2019, that the capital improvement plan assists the county in its long-range financial and public work plans. It also states that is this portion which received the closest scrutiny, for which funding decisions are made. The remaining years serve as a guide and an indicator of what the future capital requirements are likely to be, their cost, and probable sources of funding. This document is key for the county and also for the state. The state looks at this document when allocating the state's portion before committing monies to a school construction. With that being said, I attended Mr. Culver's CIP hearing in November 2019, and Mardella was in the presentation at the time. I left that evening not 100% comfortable, but maybe 80% hopeful that it was still a priority for Mr. Culver, simply because I have witnessed Mr. Culver saying one thing and to have him change his plans at the last minute. Mr. Culver has stated in a television interview recently that he couldn't commit county funds when the state isn't able to commit their portion for Mardella. He has this backwards, and he is misleading the community. The state needs to see the county's commitment first. They need to see that this is a priority for the county and the CIP. Then the state will commit their portion. The Board of Ed has done their due diligence in communicating with the state and submitted the approved ed spec to them last week. The state is fully aware of Mardella being the second priority for the school system after Beaver Run. As of yesterday, after I made some phone calls, I was able to confirm by a state official in Annapolis that the state is standing by, and I will quote, they said, standing by, waiting for the next steps to help fund Mardella. And also, is my understanding, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong, that right now, the way the state is looking at construction funds, that they are ready to fund 100% of construction funds for Mardella with fiscal year 21, and I think I'm accurate in that statement. Also, Governor Hogan has over $730 million in his budget for school construction, and everyone that I've talked to believes it will get approved. This leads me to the words optimistic, proactive, strong, forward-thinking, and high expectations. I am being proactive in coming to you today. I will be finding ways to educate and inform a community on what is the truth. I will be getting groups together and letting them hear from the people who understand all steps of the process to get the school renovation completed. I am optimistic that Mr. Culver will realize that west side of the county is important and that our kids are not pieces on a chessboard that can be played. Our kids cannot wait 5 to 10 years to get a state-of-the-art, fully functioning, and safe learning environment. We want the latest technology with working heating and air conditioning. It is not acceptable for our kids to attend a school that will be over 65 years old if it ever gets completed. Our community is strong. We are forward thinkers with high expectations of our elected officials. We expect our county executive to listen to us citizens. We expect our county executive to find a balance and to work with our county council, department heads, and agencies. We expect our county executive to sit at the table and have important and sometimes difficult discussions, to find solutions to keep our county functioning, which includes our school system. So I was preparing this, I had a lot of questions. And I wonder, did he meet with the Board of Education before making this decision? Did he notify the superintendent or school board president of his plans? And if yes, when did he do that? If he's truly concerned about the funding, did he express those to the Board of Education and try to find a solution to those concerns? Did he ask about the status of Mardella renovation project? Does he understand that the Mardella community went through a process that provided 3 options looking at the future of Mardella, and that option 3 was chosen, which kept Mardella Middle and High School together? Why didn't the CIP get uploaded to the county website around December 17, 2019, when it was completed? Why didn't the West Side community get notified by the county executive about the project being pulled earlier? And why didn't I get an honest response on January 7th in my email? Although I realize that the county council isn't able to add Mardella back to the CIP, I am asking all of you, but especially those of you at large, and Ms. Ackley, representing our district, to help us get this back on the CIP. And since Mr. Culver isn't in the room and is probably watching me on TV 75 feet away, I'm asking him to put Mardella back in the CIP. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wright.
Thank you.
Do we have any more comments? Dr. Hanlon?
Good morning. My name is Eileen Johnson, and I'm with Wicomico Push for Education, and we advocate for increased investment in education in our county. We're a grassroots group of parents and educators and concerned citizens, and we've been through this before, so yes, this does feel like deja vu. We wanted to just repeat that we stand with the Mardella community who showed up in full force last spring, and were given their word by Mr. Culver that this funding they would find a way. And everyone on the council, each person spoke and verbally committed to making sure this was a priority. And I'll just remind everyone that everyone here on the council, from what I understand, what I've read, has run on the promise of making education a priority. And this is what I told members of our group after hearing about this just a couple days ago. Lack of communication, information, and transparency continues to be our biggest obstacle. This is what makes people distrust their government. When they promise one thing, give their word that they will have their back and stand up for what they need, and then discard that promise without communicating about it. I only found out about the cut to the Mardella renovations, which have been needed for decades, from a Facebook alert from a Mardella parent, despite the fact that I follow the county executive's page and try to constantly be aware of what's happening. Last spring, the Mardella community mobilized and showed up in full force to advocate for their dire needs. We saw a community that cares deeply for one another as they voiced their frustrations at having to make do for decades with an unsafe, inadequate, and deeply uncomfortable learning environment. I think most of them are not able to be here right now because they're in school. They were heard by the county council and the county executive. All the political representatives there gave their word that education remains a top priority. And indeed, that's what they campaigned on. All said, we must find a way to make this work. Mr. Culver stood up and gave his word that he would find a way. We do remember the very small amount that the Board of Education had requested, $800,000 towards maintenance of effort, which is less than 1/3 of 1% of the overall $156 million budget. He said that he would have to cut the planned Mardella funding when he gave that $800,000. We know this could not possibly be true since they are two different budgets. One is capital and one is operating. To our knowledge, he may not move dollars from one funding source to another. So in this case, moving it from capital to operating. We also know that our county has a record budget surplus, which is to be used for exactly this kind of investment. Capital spending, infrastructure, et cetera. I've heard different figures about what that surplus is. Again, every representative has a different number, or some just don't know on the amount of that surplus. But all agree that it's in the tens of millions of dollars. Renovating Mardella so that it has heating and cooling, enough room for its students, clean air for all students, and staff to breathe. These aren't luxuries. They are necessities, and they are an investment in our most precious resource. Every one of our elected officials claims to stand for education. It's time for them to work together to get it done. Open up a conversation about the budget surplus. Be transparent about what is happening with our county investments. Tell us when you cut plans that hundreds of families are counting on to have a safe, comfortable learning environment where they can all thrive. Tell us where to be so we can show up and help you all work together to find a way. And so we call on the Board of Ed, the County Council, the County Executive to work together to find a way to do this. I do remember at a certain point last spring when all the Mardella community showed up, I remember Mr. Culver said, well, it sounds like we just need a whole new school. And I can understand that feeling. It seems like, just kind of fixing things here and there versus it sounds like the school is in such dire need. But from what I understand, you all have been through this process for a long time, and there was already, as Michelle said, 3 options, and the Mardella community chose to do those improvements versus doing a whole new school. So I think we should trust the experts and the engineers who said what could be done, and the Mardella community who says what they need, and give them what was promised to them, and we feel strongly that the county executive should have kept his word on this and should be here to explain what's going on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Dr. Hanlon?
Good morning, Donna Hanlon, Wicomico County,
Good morning.
Superintendent of Schools. Good morning, President Dodd and members of the council. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments this morning on the county CIP. I don't believe that you need to hear from me again about the needs that we have at Mardella, but I would like to share with you, and in some cases emphasize, some factual information that has already been shared that may be helpful to you in making decisions, in working with us on requests from the Board of Ed relative to the CIP over the course of the next few months. First, the Mardella renovation and addition project is the result of the feasibility study that included open meetings with the community. The feasibility study was completed last year as recommended by the School Building Commission, which has county executive, county council, and community member representation. Next, while the state has not yet given planning approval for the Mardella Middle and High renovation project, or the West Side Intermediate roof for that matter, which has remained in the county CIP, the state is only 1/3 of the way through its recommendations this year. This process is ongoing. The state will continue to consider the Mardella project as it develops its final list of recommendation, which may not come until June. The fact that state planning approval was deferred at this step is not unusual. My third point, as has been mentioned, last Tuesday evening, the Board of Ed approved the educational specifications for the Mardella project, and the Ed spec was then submitted the following day, last Wednesday, to further support the school system's request for planning approval. Next, in order to receive state planning approval and later state construction funding, we need additional county funding up front to complete the design requirements. We appreciate that the county has already provided some funding, as has been mentioned this morning, to advance the project in these early stages, and we certainly wouldn't want that funding to have been wasted. Without the additional funding from the county to cover steps like the schematic design, the project would be on hold, and we would not be in a position to seek state construction funding. Additionally, local fiscal support is critical to obtaining state support for school construction projects. If the state doesn't see that a county is allocating funds for a school project, the state will be less likely to give planning approval and eventually state construction funding and funding for the project. The Mardella project is going through the same funding and planning approval process that past projects such as James M. Bennett, Bennett Middle School, West Salisbury, Parkside, and Beaver Run have all gone through. It starts with county funding first. Most recently, both West Salisbury and Beaver Run have received local funding in advance of state planning approval. Beaver Run's first county allocation was in December of 2017, with state planning approval following in May 2018. West Salisbury had multiple local allocations in FY14, with state planning approval following in January 2016. I recognize that the county executive would only like to do one major project at a time. However, I'd like to remind everyone that with 24 schools, that would mean that once Beaver Run is finished, it would be another 125 years before we could return to that school for major renovation. Finally, in the past, we have had a standing meeting each month with the county executive's office, and our staff have more informal meetings and conversations about capital improvement projects that are continually discussed. The WCPS CIP was submitted to the county executive in September of 2019 prior to his public input session and the executive's draft CIP coming forward to the council in December. I think that from all interactions, you know that I want to work with the county, we want to work with the county, communicating openly and working collaboratively towards solutions. To that end, I would like to offer 2 possible solutions to continue to move Mardella forward. The draft county CIP has an overage of $1.2 million on the Beaver Run project for FY22, not what was in our request. On page 35 of our request, and you should have received a copy of this when it was submitted, we submitted 15 copies in September. If you don't have that, Mr. Stauffer brought extras with him. On page 35 of our CIP submitted in September, we requested $4.7 million for FY 2022 for Beaver Run. However, in the county executive's CIP, he has proposed $5.9 million in FY 2022 for that project, again, an overage of $1.2 million. Additionally, recent closeout of bonds from previous projects results in a little over $4 million. We are suggesting that with the allocation overage for Beaver Run and the use of closeout bonds, our request for $2.5 million for Mardella in FY 2022 is indeed possible and would allow us to go consistently from schematic design through pre-construction or ready to bid. Thank you for your consideration and allowing me to share these facts and possible solutions with you. And on behalf of the Board of Education and Mardella Middle and High School community, I thank you for your continued support, and we look forward to working collaboratively with you in finding solutions.
Thank you, Dr. Hanlon.
Thank you.
Do we have any more comments on the CIP? Any more comments? This concludes the public hearing on the CIP. We will be discussing the CIP after lunch in a work session if you wish to attend. Thank you. Next up on the agenda, we have the audit presentation by Pig, Kroll, and Stern. Good morning. If you could introduce yourselves.
Of course.
Good morning. My name is Mike Kleger. I'm a partner with PKS and Company.
I'm Ashley Stern. I'm the audit manager on the Wicomico County Audit.
Good morning. I'm Ryan Taylor. I'm a senior accountant with PKS and Company.
Okay. Thank you for inviting us here today. We have previously delivered and reviewed a draft of these financial statements with management and the reports with them at this time. And our purpose today is to present the audit results, go through some of the key highlights, and then, of course, try to answer any questions you may have for us today. I'd like to begin with the large bound financial statements, if I could, just to kind of go through what the audit reports say. And the audit report is on pages 1 through 3. Page 1 covers management's responsibilities for the preparation and presentation of the financial statements, and our responsibilities as auditors to gather evidence, perform audit procedures in order to express an opinion on those statements. And on the second page of the report is the middle paragraph is that the actual opinion on the statements, and that's the most important paragraph within this report. And I'm happy to say that our opinion on the county's financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2019 is unmodified. What this means is that the financial statements present fairly the financial position of the county in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. This is also known as a clean audit opinion and is the highest level of assurance that we can provide as auditors. The second report I want to mention is at the very back of the financial statements on pages 144 and 145. Unlike the audit report, this is not an opinion on internal controls or compliance, but rather a report on findings or deficiencies noted in during our audit testing. This year, we did have one significant deficiency in internal controls relating to monthly reconciliations and closing procedures not being consistently performed or timely throughout the year. This was due to extensive finance staff turnover during fiscal year 2019, and the circumstances of those comments are more fully explained on page 146 of the schedule findings and responses. And we did not note any compliance matters during the current year's fiscal audit. So that's a summary of the two audit reports that are within the financial statements, and then with that, I'll turn it over to Ashley to cover some of the financial highlights.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm actually not going to have you flip through the packets in front of you. Instead, there's a colored presentation copy that we're going to kind of go through some key highlights. But feel free to stop me at any point, throw something at me if you have any questions, and we'll get them answered at that time since there's a lot of information to go through.
Thank you.
So I'm actually on page 3 of your presentation packet. Again, it's the colored PowerPoint packet, and we'll go ahead and start there. So some key financial highlights for your government-wide financial statements. Just for a reference point, your government-wide financial statements can be found starting on page 15 of the large audit packet. This basis is done on the full accrual basis and not the budgetary basis. So when you're thinking about some of these numbers, it's not done on your budgetary basis. It includes both your governmental and your business type activities, as well as your component units, the Board of Education and the Wicomico County Free Library. One of the key changes in the government-wide financial statements from fiscal year 2018 to fiscal year 2019 is that the Civic Center has been reclassified as a governmental activity as opposed to a business-type activity. In the grand scheme of things, on the government-wide financial statements, this hasn't changed anything. It's just moved it from one column to the other, but it does change the type of basis that's reported later in the financial statements.
Ashley, does that change anything from a operational perspective and standpoint?
So it doesn't change anything from an operational standpoint. What it does is the Government Accounting Standards Board indicates that we should review each fund to ensure that its activities are consistent with that fund type as determined from accounting standards. So we've taken a look at the Civic Center over many years, and it is consistently through its budgetary items, budgeting for a county appropriation for their operations, not for capital matters. So this year, we've been discussing it over the past couple years, and this year we just made the one change from an accounting standpoint to have it change its classification, but nothing from operations or budgetary standpoints.
The words we always use was enterprise fund.
Correct.
And I think what that means is, in your situation, is at one time the county did not put funds into the Civic Center. It stood on its own.
Self-sustained.
And now we are funding it to make improvements and such. So.
Correct. Correct.
And that is more typical for a department like Parks and Recs, isn't it?
Correct. That's what, if you look across the country, of course, there are going to be civic centers or departments like that that can support itself, but it is pretty typical to see something like this. A couple key financial figures from your government-wide financial statements. In taking a look at your net position, that is a good indicator of the government's overall health. And over time, this can be an indicator of certain financial decisions. The unrestricted net position on your government-wide financial statements was just over $36 million, or 25% of your total net position. Other types of net position include your restricted net position, which would be restricted for certain purposes, or you're invested in capital assets, so capital assets across the county.
Sorry to keep.
No, you're fine.
That's what we're here for, right?
Yep.
So what's the peer group measure that we should be comparing this against?
So the government, the GFOA actually makes a recommendation for your general fund instead of your government-wide, and I'll actually go over that in just a minute for what your peer recommendations are.
All right. I'll be patient.
Overall, your unrestricted net position from 2018 to 2019 increased by 6.47 million. I know that sounds like a very large number,
It is.
but a lot of that has to do with some actuarial fluctuations with your other post-employment benefits as well as your pension plan, and that can change any day. So it is a snapshot as of June 30th based upon investments, projected retirement dates, mortality tables done by the actuary of both plans, and even in the next day, July 1st, that number would have changed, and we expect that to fluctuate from year to year. Back in 2018, we saw a completely different number. Taking a look at the key financial highlights for your general fund, we spend a lot of time throughout the year budgeting the general fund, so I think that's the most important piece to take a look at from the key financial highlights. The unassigned fund balance remains strong, right about $37 million. As I mentioned just a second ago, the fund balance is a good indicator of health of the general fund. The GFOA recommends no less, and I want to repeat, the no less than 60 days of operating expenditures as your unassigned fund balance. However, the more prudent recommendation becomes between 90 and 80 of 180 days of operating expenses held within your unassigned fund balance. Currently, that $37 million that I mentioned is right about 101 days of operating expenditures. The general fund revenues increased from 2018 by right about $12 million. This has to do with your property tax revenues increased due to an increase in assessable base, local income tax revenue increasing by just about $5 million, and investment earnings were actually up from 2018 of just over $1 million. General fund expenses increased by $282,000. This increase is a combination of a few things. Increase of funding to the Board of Education for maintenance of efforts, rising costs of health insurance county-wide, and that's across the county, not just in the general fund, and decreases in various expenses such as public health, as well as a few other positions that were open during the year. Fund balance after transfers has increased by $4.1 million in the general fund in 2019. A few key figures from your budget to actual figures. The real detail of the budget to actual can be found starting on page 117 of the statements, just for future reference. Budgeted revenues were just over $7 million, greater than expected. As I mentioned, that has to do with an increase in your local income tax revenue, which was tough to predict with the new Tax Cuts and Jobs Act last year. I don't know if you guys saw it increase in your state tax, but I sure did in 2018. And your budgeted expenses were $6.9 million less than expected. A lot of that decrease in the budgeted expenses has to do with timing of your capital outlay expenses. If something was planned to happen in 2019, but didn't get to happen all the way till July of 2019, that'll be accounted for in fiscal year 2020. Over the next couple of pages, I've included a few graphs. Sometimes a graph can speak 1,000 words. So we've looked at the trend of general fund revenues over the past 5 years. So as you can see, an increase in your property taxes over the past 5 years due to assessable base increases, increase in your income taxes received for the general fund over the past 5 years, and increase in just other revenues for the county over the past 5 years. The next graph shows the general fund expenses by a few types that I've pulled out over the past 5 years to kind of show the fluctuation. Salaries are up slightly for 2019 as compared to 2018. Other operating expenditures, including capital outlay, have just slightly decreased from 2018 to 2019. Debt service, which is a function of the bonds that have been taken out, both the principal and the interest portion, has actually decreased slightly from 2018 due to a bond refunding that occurred a few years ago, as well as Board of Education expenses, and this is just the operating portion, increased from 2018 to 2019.
Glad you pointed that out.
Just operating. Taking a look at kind of the overall expenditures, looking at kind of a pie piece to be able to see exactly where all the county expenditures for the general fund have occurred. Education is just over 36%. And then secondly falls behind education is public safety, the detention center, and various other general government items. The next graph indicates how the general fund balance has moved over the past 5 years. And as I mentioned, a really good indicator of the overall health of the general fund. I've split this into two categories. One, which is the undesignated or unassigned, unrestricted, as some will refer to it as, which is the lighter green, and the darker green, which it includes the restricted as well as invested in capital assets. Overall, you'll see an increase from 2018 to 2019, but it's remained pretty stable over the past 5 years. Taking a look at some key financial highlights for those enterprise funds or business type activities, taking a look at solid waste first, I've pulled out some that I thought were important, but feel free to ask questions about any of the other enterprise funds. Solid waste saw an increase in its net position of just over $68,000. That's compared to $579 in 2018, and that's due to the opening of the new cell. So we have some first-year costs that we have to recognize from an accounting standpoint that maybe weren't cash outlay costs this year, but overall, a strong increase for solid waste. The airport, we saw an increase in revenues from 2018 to 2019 by $220,000.
About what percentage would that have been?
I do not know off the top of my head.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Expenses increased from 2018 by just over $140,000. And we had a decrease in our net position of $1.9 million. And I want to caution you on that decrease in the net position. What will happen with airport, and you're going to see this over again, I think we talked about this in a few previous years, that when a grant comes in for a runway extension, you actually recognize the grant revenue all in that year. However, then accounting standards require that you then recognize the depreciation related to that capital asset over the next life of the asset. So we're seeing expenses now for items that we brought in revenue years ago for. So when I say a decrease in net position, it's not that the county has lost $1.9 million at the airport. It's just that you're recognizing expenses later than when you had the revenue in previous years.
Well, actually, is it also the result of that we forward some of the money on the runway extension, even though we don't have with the expectation of getting the grant dollars? So those costs or expenses are in here now, even though we don't have the offsetting grants yet.
Right, so the costs that have been forwarded for some runway funding have been capitalized.
Okay.
So you're not actually
So
seeing
we're not
that
seeing
expense.
that in this, okay.
You will when the runway is fully operational, start to be depreciated.
Okay, all right.
Councilman Holloway?
Yes. Ashley, where we moved or you moved the accounting for the Civic Center to government liability, basically. Don't you think it's time we do that with the airport? Because that is, I mean, if you look at our capital improvement budget, and it's $30-some million for the next 5 years, is that in the works to be done?
So GASB indicates that we should be looking at the operational expenses when we're determining if they should be an enterprise fund or a governmental activity, not just the capital expenditures. But the airports across the country, there are quite a few that are considered governmental activities and quite a few that are considered business-type activities. We're keeping an eye on it,
Okay.
for lack of better terms, and working with the airport to kind of monitor what their budgetary thought processes are. I went ahead and did some 5-year trends for the two enterprise funds that we had just talked about. Taking a look at solid waste, we saw a consistent increase in revenues over the past 5 years, as well as an increase in your operating expenses. As I mentioned, this fiscal year 19 has a little bit of an unusual year just because of the opening of a new cell, and I will expect that that levels out after the next couple years. Taking a look at the airport, I'm going to point out 2016, which is a little bit of the darker green. That was a year that we've got a lot of grant revenue in. So that's why you're seeing the increase in net position, like I had mentioned, whereas we're experiencing expenses over the next few years. As a note, for 2019, we saw airport depreciation of just over $4 million. So if you add back depreciation, there's not actually a loss on the airport. Now that we've taken a look at the past year, I always like to look forward to help with your decision-making over the next years. Two new GASB statements that will be coming out is number one, GASB statement number 84, fiduciary activities. This really redefines what activities are considered to be fiduciary for the county, and that means that the county basically just holds the funds, but it's not any of the county's money. So we'll be looking at this over the next few years to really determine what might need to be reclassified. GASB.
What would be give us an example, maybe?
An example would be like the village downriver, where the county is holding funds, and then as they need to be distributed, the county is distributing it, but it's not actually county money to use.
Okay.
GASB statement number 87, which will is currently effective June 30th, 2021, with a most likely one-year extension to 2022. Really redefines what leases are. In previous years, we've had both capital and operating leases. So if you have rent expense, if you're renting a building, that might be considered an operating leases. GASB 87 actually does away with operating leases, and they would no longer be reported in the financial statements, and they'll be reported as certain right-of-use assets and right-of-use liabilities, as opposed to just being an expense. So it's a major change on many government financial statements.
But it is an expense.
Yeah, but it is yep.
It'll essentially be amortized is what will happen,
Mhm.
yeah. But as you mentioned, it's probably going to be pushed out another year because
Mhm.
they keep extending the application period for that.
Correct. The other packet that you have in front of you, the smaller packet, is our required auditor's communications. And that includes a best practice recommendation letter, which has been reviewed and gone over with the county executive and the executive staff, as well as a communication to those charged with governance. I'm happy to answer any questions about either of the auditor's communications and or the financial statements, if anybody has any.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I do.
Joe?
I do. On page 10 of the big book, get all these books squared away. Bottom. Bottom paragraph, general fund, the purchase order carry forward, $139 million. Of that $139 million, is there a accounting done of what projects, basically, I guess you would call them dead projects, projects that's not going to be done, project money that could be put back into the general fund? When does this $139 million, I know a lot of it's probably for road projects. I guess I'm having a hard time explaining my question here, but when do we get an accounting on what's not going to be used out of this $139 million?
So I think that sentence might be a little bit misleading. The $139 million would be the budgetary appropriation, not the actual carry forward purchase orders. But at year end, we actually do a pretty extensive test of all carry forward purchase orders to ensure that things aren't being carried forward that aren't going to be done. Mm-hmm. So we require an explanation as well as documentation for anything that is carried forward to 2020, like a budgetary appropriation.
Is that in here?
We don't include our testing in here, but
Okay.
I have the details if you'd like to go over some of those.
So I guess the concern is it's like when the board was up here, there was money left over.
Mm-hmm.
And we always seem to be short on some things that you want to get done, is how much of this is just laying out there in limbo and not being able to be used, I guess is a good question.
Is there any detail on that?
Yeah, I believe I have the exact number, and let me flip, it's actually back in the footnotes.
After about page 50, it started running together.
Yeah, 144 pages might put you to sleep at night.
You don't have to answer that now.
It was, it's right over $10 million is how much was carried forward from 39, and that's countywide.
Now, that's 10 million that's not going to be used for any projects?
So that would be what's carried forward from 2019 to 2020 that will be used for projects that we've done testing. In previous years, we've made the recommendation for those encumbrances to be examined, but Nick in the purchasing department has done a good job at forcing people to close things that they are not going to use. So in our testing, the ones that are left to be carried forward, we've done the testing on them.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Nicole?
I had one on, I guess it was the money that Dr. Hanlon had mentioned was left over from other projects. I'm sorry. The money that Dr. Hanlon had mentioned was left over from other projects. And I'm not seeing, maybe you can point me in the right direction of how much money that was.
So we wouldn't report that money in the financial statements. What I believe she's referring to, it's money that actually has been taken out for bonds from previous years that's sitting in county cash accounts. That was intended, or county investment accounts is the better term. Was intended to be used for prior projects, like Bennett. So bond funding that was taken out, that then is still just sitting in county cash accounts. So it's actually included in overall county investments.
So do you know what the number is?
I don't. I'd have to see what she's looking at, but we made the recommendation as of June 30th for that to be looked at because we were seeing a few projects that had, as they pass by, we expect things to be used in 3 to 5 years. So we like to recommend that be looked at, and they've worked over the past couple months on identifying those numbers.
So how many years has that gone back that this money has accrued?
I'm not sure which project she's talking about, but I can identify those and send those to you.
Well, she specifically was just talking about Beaver Run, and in the forward year, the budget for that was, basically she's saying is over budgeted in that final year request for Beaver Run.
Gotcha.
So
We wouldn't show that
You wouldn't
capital
show
budget
that,
in here. Yeah.
Mr. Dodd, if I could just point out, there is a charter provision on this, too.
Can you speak up,
Section-
Mr. Taylor?
Section 710 of the charter.
Okay. Mr. Cannon, do you have something?
Yes. Good morning. Very thorough, very good review. And I appreciated the fact that you recognized that there was, in your comments on the grant accountability that you felt was necessary on page 2. The comments you made on the second page in reference to capital assets, what could you review that sort of in layman's terms?
So,
where are you, John?
It's page 2 of their report. It's probably, 4 or 5 in the PDF.
This book or this book?
the littler one.
The big book, little book?
Whatever's in our brief book. Let me tell you.
Okay.
Perfect. So there are 2 comments on page 2 regarding the capital assets. Number 1 is just reconciling the capital assets to accounting records, and number 2 was identifying capital asset additions. So on a governmental fund basis, typically as capital asset additions come in, they were being expensed, but they still need to be identified if they need to be capitalized in accordance with the county's capitalization policies. And sometimes with department changeovers, it especially wasn't being caught throughout the year, leading to many capital asset additions needing to be added after the year into the accounting records. So we just have made the recommendation that throughout the year, these be identified, one by outside departments outside of the general fund and within the finance department to ensure that they're being caught throughout the year. And we see this across many of our governments, since it's, they're paying the expenditures, maybe not thinking about what needs to be capitalized because it doesn't affect the general fund basis. So this can be a recommendation to many of our governments. But especially this year, we noted that should be started to be looked at in 2020.
Is that a situation whereas maybe there's a lack of communication between the different departments? sharing that information with the finance department, or?
I think sometimes things, for example, like if a professional service was paid for that would need to be capitalized down the road rather than expense, I think it's just identifying that, yes, this has to do with a capital asset addition. So, so the communication to be there. I believe they've already purchased a communication tool or a stamp so that these can be identified and made sure that they're being caught throughout the year, so as not to have a large burden at year end and entering these into the capital asset software.
Okay. Any more questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Cannon?
I was wondering on page 7, and I'll help you, everyone else out here. It is, that would be 60 on your PDF if you're following your brief book on the computer. How significant do you really feel, I mean, you stated as a significant difficulties encountered during the audit. Can you expound on that a little bit as far as the fact, because we had concerns as well when we realized that an accounting firm actually had to be brought in to the finance department in order to prepare for the audit. And I was just hoping you could expand on that a little bit.
So especially due to staff turnover, unusual staff turnover in the finance department that occurred right after fiscal year end, and bringing in new staff, the timely training new staff, finding new staff, that takes time. And thus our audit was delayed in getting everything together. Also, as you mentioned, and I believe it's also on that same page 7, we do disclose that an outside accounting firm was brought in to assist in some of the reconciliations. We actually see that in other governments as well, where they'll, because of staffing difficulties, they will rely on, we do this for some governments as well. But that did cause various delays in our audit based upon our planned timing and what we had communicated, so we wanted to make sure we had mentioned that as well.
I guess you mentioned staff, but we're also like on our 5th finance director in like 5 or 6 years. Do you find that challenging when you keep changing management like that every year or so?
It can be challenging. Yeah, it can be challenging.
Yeah.
I had a question on page 7 of the, I guess it was the management recommendations. It had under the statement of net position and statement of activities, the second paragraph. The county carries $88 million in debt on its portion of the financial statement under primary government related to school assets. Is $88 million on the high side?
It does seem like a lot of money, but for, every county is unique in their size and their number of schools. So you kind of comparing to other counties and what they might hold in debt. It's I believe the percentage, it's like 60-something% of the total county debt. But that is the purpose of taking out those debts to do those funding.
So it's 60% of our county debt, and do they have specific financials on this debt? I mean, do they have like itemized of where this debt is going to? Is it going to capital improvements? Is it going to operating costs? Is it?
So all the debt that is on the county statements for that $88 million would be for past school projects or bonds that have been taken out for those types of projects.
Capital projects.
Capital projects.
Yeah,
not operating.
Not operating.
Okay. So I guess to find out where we are on those capital projects, we would have to ask the Board of Education, because they don't give us those.
Right. So the Board of Education does have their separately issued financial statements done by their auditing firm. And I believe they can be found in their CAFR on their website.
Right, it is on their website.
Is it on their website? That would give a little bit more detail of those capital.
And a lot of their information is incorporated into this statement because it is considered a component unit of the county. So
it's a component unit?
Yes, yes it is.
And as we found out this morning, they have $4 million somewhere that we didn't know they had,
That just
right?
seems like an awful lot of money to,
Yeah.
like.
I understand they over budget for Beaver Run, but the $4 million languishing out there, I guess I was kind of surprised by it.
Well, they don't have the 4 million, the county has.
Yeah, well.
It wasn't their dollars, it was county dollars.
But it's in the Board of Education's accounts, correct?
Right, so
It's not in the county.
No, I think they
No.
stated that.
No, it's not.
It was an overage that was issued by the executive office.
Right.
Not the requested.
Can you finish, Ashley? You just were going to say
Oh,
something.
so it is in the county's investment account. So the
Okay.
$4 million, the county took out a bond years ago and for a project, and then it's actually, the $4 million is still sitting in a county investment account, county owned.
Doesn't that have to be used up in a certain amount of time?
So our recommendation was to kind of have the finance department go back to your bond counsel, ensure how the bond was written, because each bond is written differently, and see if it can be reallocated. I believe that is already in the process, if that already hasn't been done. Make sure there wouldn't be any costs associated with a reallocation, because sometimes if a bond is written in a certain way, you don't want to penalize anybody, but also work with the Board of Ed and the accountants over at the Board of Ed to ensure that there aren't any more expenses coming in, because sometimes you can receive a late invoice or something that they're still working on.
Okay, but some of these have been out for some time.
They've
So
been-
it probably shouldn't be.
I was going to say, well, so did you see this last year also?
So I believe some of these are, some of the individual accounts were small. It was like $757, for projects that had occurred years ago. But some of them were larger to deal with, like James and Bennett. So there were still amounts coming in, or expenditures coming in the last couple years. So we haven't seen as much this year, so we're making the recommendations.
So you did see it last year, though. You saw that amount last year.
It still had a little different amount, but yes.
Yeah, Mr. Dodd, if I may, I'd just point out there is another charter section that deals with that. It's 712 of the charter. So these are things that, to some extent, are controlled by charter language,
Yes.
which would govern.
Mr. Cannon?
Also on, I was glad to see that the income tax estimates were low and the results were very high.
That's hard to budget every year, it's because
It
it
is.
vary significantly year to year.
So the federal tax calculations, were that great to benefit the local government, that it was a $5 million difference?
So kind of across the board, with the changes in the federal account, the Schedule A deductions mostly, where they raised the standard deduction, doubled it. Many people were not taking the itemized deductions, thus on the state of Maryland, they weren't taking it as well, so they received more of a federal refund or lack of not having to pay as much. But in turn, they actually owed a little bit more to Maryland.
I'm going to try to make this quick, but, sometimes I like to be able to take the numbers and find out really what's behind the scenes there. It's similar to what Councilman Holloway said. I have concerns also. We like the work that all these departments are doing for us. We think they're doing great work, but, there's concerns on my part with the Civic Center that they're talking about, the status of that as an enterprise fund versus not an enterprise fund. If you look at the charts of the numbers near the end of your presentation or your audit, we find it very disconcerting as far as the nursing home and the airport as well. The page 13, the 77 on the PDF for the council, the investment earnings, it's 92 for the council and page 22. The numbers surprised me is the fact that we're seeing large negative numbers for major departments in this county, and that is a large concern for us overall. I'm wondering how that plays out as far as your perception.
So just making sure I'm on the same page, you're on page 21 of the financial statements?
On page 22 of the financial
Yep.
statements, 92 in the PDF for the
Perfect.
council.
So with the airport funding there, that airport column includes both the airport capital and the airport operating. I
Right.
think when we take a look at the airport, we take a look at them as two separate pieces in analyzing if it should be an enterprise fund or the same way we analyze the Civic Center.
Right, I understand that. And
Yep.
I heard that your response to Joe, but I don't see how the capital, I understand the GASB, or however you have to define it. But when you have problems, major problems in capital, you're going, that's a major impact on the entire business as a whole.
It does. So we're kind of monitoring how they're doing their budget, because if they're budgeting to say, hey, we should be making money on an operating standpoint, that's, as GASB sees it, a plan to make money. So we've been kind of every year we've looked at this one, and it is on our radar for a potential change down the road.
And with the Civic Center also falling into the same category of being removed from the enterprise fund, what's your position on that?
So for the Civic Center, we had been analyzing that for the past 3 or 4 years, taking a look at the general fund appropriation to the Civic Center, and that from an operating standpoint, they were budgeting every year to receive that money in order to break even.
Right.
So that we went ahead and implemented that change this year because it was time.
Okay. I only have 2 more questions, and then I'm going to stop. On page 21, which is 90 in the PDF, solid waste receivables I thought were really high, and their cash was really high. So I'm a novice, so I have to ask these questions. I have no idea what that means.
So part of the cash for solid waste is a required, they have to keep money sitting aside to cover future post-closure care costs. So not only just the closure, yep, so it's a financial assurance.
Okay.
There's, so most of that has to do with needing to keep that aside, but it is sitting in county investment accounts and is earning interest. It's not just sitting in a checking account.
Were the high receivables a concern?
I don't remember that being an issue.
Yeah, I don't remember that being an issue, but we have taken a look at the receivables related to that, and I didn't remember having any concerns or any issues with my testing from that.
Okay. My last question.
I will mention also, Mr.
Yes.
Cannon, that the post-closure cost did go up significantly this year with the new cell that was added. So when you're talking about the cash reserves, a lot of that deals with future post-closure costs.
Okay.
To speak into the microphone.
Speaking of the mic.
Sorry.
They tell me that all the time.
I know.
And the last thing I have is with the wind case fund. And if you don't know this answer, I'm sure we could ask the administration. I was wondering exactly, because 2019 is when it starts having to be paid back, exactly how much, is there sufficient amount in that fund reserve?
It's probably over-reserved at
Good.
this point. That's what
Perfect.
we're thinking. We didn't change that. It's still 855, the same number as last year, but we
Right.
think that's probably a large number. It's going to be less than that.
Okay.
So.
Mr. Hastings?
I was not an accounting major. That was not my degree. I studied marketing. And forgive me if you've already covered this, but the SALT issue, state and local taxes, I see MACO has put out a lot of conversations. I know since we've had the changes in federal taxes, that there's been a bill, I think, at the state level. Can you provide any guidance as far as, or do you know what's happening with that, or what we expect to, how that could impact us?
So with the state that's currently in session now, taking a look at their income tax, when the federal government finalized their tax act, which was even after December of last year, a lot of states didn't have time to react to the SALT tax, or the state and local income tax, or the state and local tax. So how that has affected the county is that the county has actually received more money this year in income tax, thus that income tax increase. But how that, any changes to the Maryland state tax law going forward, if the state allows for more deductions or changes, whatever they approve, it actually could reduce local income tax in the future.
Yeah. I mean, some other states, for example, Delaware, in Maryland, if you take a standard deduction on your return, if you take the standard deduction on the federal return, you're forced to do that on the state. In Delaware, for example, you can still itemize on the state return, even if you take a standard deduction on federal. So those kinds of things, state by state, are going to have to be debated and analyzed. So.
Mr. Holloway?
Yeah, I guess one question drives another one here. On page 21 of the big book, John mentioned accounts receivable. Is there an accounting done? I see the nursing home is 1.3 million, okay, and I know that we've had problems in the past collecting, and we even asked some of our state legislators to step in. Is there, and the 914,000 on the solid waste, is there an accounting done to see if that is a rolling total? I mean, are things coming in and going out? Is that, or is there, say that 1.3, is half of that been out there for 90, 120, or 6 months or a year? I mean, do you know that? Is that part of what you do?
So the nursing home is actually audited by, is required to be audited by a separate accounting firm, so they actually issue their own separate audit. That 1.3 is actually a net, so there's an allowance of what they believe wouldn't be collectible. So the 1.3 is what the rolling total of what they believe is collectible, as audited by their auditors. For solid waste, I can attest to those that accounts receivable is a rolling total. I don't have the numbers in front of me on what the days in receivables would be, but from our testing, that was collectible.
And that's a net figure as well. So that's after an allowance for an estimate of doubtful accounts.
So say 800 of that isn't owed for a year or more, and 100,000 is turning over every 30
If there was
days or
something that's a
60.
year old in there, it's already in the allowance account. So
Okay.
we've already written that down, if there's something that is that old.
I just had two really quick questions, and that was on the nursing home and of the Board of Education again. So with the nursing home and the Board of Ed, these are, what you're speaking of are financial audits that you're basing your opinion, not performance audits.
That's correct.
So-
They're done by other auditors.
Okay, all right, 'cause
The
that-
nursing home is, for sure.
Okay.
Which we get a copy of their full report.
Because it seems like those are two ongoing issues, and maybe it's something we need to look into.
From our audit standpoint, since each of them are required to have a separate audit, it doesn't fall under like the county's general government-wide purview. But we received their auditor reports, and we take a look through all of them, and report the numbers in here, the Board of Ed and the nursing home reports as well.
Okay. And like I said, they're just they're
And the
not
library,
performance.
I'm sorry.
They're just financial, they're not performance.
Just financial
Okay.
audit,
Well,
yes.
the library is one of our audits, so we do that as
Okay.
a separate
Oh,
audit.
good.
So, yeah.
Any more questions? If there's no more questions, we'll be in touch with you if we do have any more.
Sure. Absolutely.
Thank you for your presentation.
We're always happy to answer questions after the fact. Email us, call us, anything like that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Next on the agenda is a presentation by Mr. Chris Bitters, General Manager of the Delmarva Shorebirds.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Pass these out real quick. Here's some community reports.
Hey, Chris.
Thanks, sir.
And I'll try to get us out of here before Rotary.
Yeah,
Be
well.
on time and good returns.
I won't be able to make it.
No shot. All
unfortunately.
right.
Yeah.
Such love.
Wish I could.
Don't I get one?
Oh. Yeah, I was scared of the microphones, I guess.
You're fine. Mr. Bitters?
Well, good morning again. Thank you for inviting me to be here to just kind of recap the 2019 Shorebird season. I just handed out our annual report that'll be distributed Thursday to our fans on the at our hot stove banquet at the Civic Center. Mike Elias, the GM, is coming down from the Orioles to speak, and we have about 300 guests coming to Civic Center on Thursday for an event. So it's a good time to kick off baseball season. So I'm glad to be here a couple days in advance of that. So this is 36 pages long. We clearly won't go through it. You guys have had a lot on your agenda already, and I know looking around the room, there's others that are probably coming up here afterwards. But just to peruse it quickly, we're proud of our efforts in the community. We continue to look to be good stewards with the stadium and other things that we can do. We still continue to have our Fly Together Fund through the Community Foundation, which is where we host events like the Hot Stove and other events that raise money for charitable endeavors. Those monies go to the foundation, and then we're able to obviously donate those back out to other community groups. We've already done so, but one of the county projects that I'm really excited about is Field 7.5 that's happening at the Parker Complex. We'll be announcing it Thursday, but I'll share with you guys. We've made a $25,000 donation to Field 7.5 project because the Challenger Little League concept and having a place for those kids and others to go play baseball is important to us. And while we would love to fund the whole thing, my pockets aren't that deep, but we did make a contribution of $25,000. As you peruse through here, we do events at the stadium as well as the stadium to continue to support the community. Brooks Toy Closet at PRMC. You'll see on the couple pages in there, donations our fans brought as well as money we've raised, and our players went shopping along with some other folks, friends of Brooks, to fulfill that closet. Jersey auctions, if you've been to a game, I know you had Big Brothers and Big Sisters here earlier. One of our jersey auctions benefits them. Another one of our July 4th jersey auctions benefits Operation We Care, the Henson Cancer Institute, and numerous others. We do somewhere between 5-6 jersey auctions, and a couple of them we use for our own community funds, so we have some funds in there that we can use at our disposal. This past holiday season, it's not noted in here, we sponsored the wreath event with Operation We Care as well to lay wreaths right around the holidays. They called, and we were glad to sponsor that as well. Other programming that we do, we work with Mount Air Farms. We help them pox chickens. We've been doing that for longer than I've been here as general manager, as well as we continue to work with PRMC to host the drive-through flu clinic at the stadium. Again, our fund, we donate, this year we donated outside of the $25,000, because we're counting that as 2020 donations. We donated another $22,000 out of that fund to different groups. And that does not include the $60,000 that we donated from in-stadium events like jersey auctions, our Float for the Fund event, and other things that we're doing at the stadium to raise money for charitable endeavors. We host Ride for the Feast at the stadium, and again, lots of other what we call social responsibility events at the ballpark. So our key programs that we continue to do very well. I just delivered bookmarks this morning, but we still continue to work with our school system throughout Delmarva, not just here in Wicomico, but throughout the peninsula, to host our annual Hit the Books reading program, which is where kids can read 4 books outside the classroom. This week, we just delivered somewhere just below 50,000 bookmarks to area schools throughout the Delmarva Peninsula. I'm from Delmar, so I delivered the 2 Delmar ones this morning, so those kids will have their bookmarks heading their way. Our senior program on Wednesdays, which is our Silver Slugger program, basically for about $20, you can get all of our Wednesday games, a ticket to every Wednesday game, which usually works out to be about 9 or 10 games a year. That's a tremendous senior program, so it averages about $2 a ticket is what it works out to be. Plus, we host a couple of events with the Silver Sluggers in this early season to meet some of the players, and then the second half of the season to meet some players, provide some refreshments. We have about 1,200 members of our Silver Slugger program that seniors that are able to come to an affordable option to come out to the ball game every Wednesday. They get a ball, and on top of that, with that $20, they actually get a ball cap provided by our sponsors. So it's a great program for our seniors in our community. So that's kind of the community recap. Again, great year. We continue to be laser focused on how do we continue to give back, be active citizens from the stadium usage. We have Warwick Community College out there every day doing truck driver training. We have the police department utilizing it and the sheriff's department utilizing it for different trainings on a regular basis. I forget which department it was, but they had the drug or bomb dogs, walking through the stadium and doing those practices. So again, we try to make sure we're using the stadium on a regular basis. So while there may not be public activities going on, just about every day, when you count Warwick especially, there is some sort of activity happening at Arthur W. Purdue Stadium besides us working in our ball games. We also, for the last couple of years, have hosted UMES at the stadium and their entire baseball season. And so they'll be kicking off here. Believe it or not, in 30 days, baseball will be played again at Purdue Stadium. It's cold, but it's been a great community relationship while they're going through some changes down there and challenges to let them be able to utilize Purdue Stadium for their games. And we've done the last 2 years. This will be our 3rd year. So, and the number of high school games and other events that we've hosted are very, very numerous. On the field-wise, that's the community-wise. On the field is our best year outside of winning the championship, is our best year in team history. We were named 2019 Minor League Baseball Team of the Year through all of minor league baseball. We had 90 wins, which set a franchise record, set a league record for probably a decade plus in terms of any other team accomplishing that. I was General Manager of the Year. Our manager was Manager of the Year. Our pitching coach was Coach of the Year. We had the top pitcher. Minor League Baseball is one of Grayson Rodriguez is a high prospect for the Orioles. He was named top prospect in our league, as well as we had Adley Rutschman. So if you're familiar with the Orioles, you're paying attention. Adley Rutschman was the first overall pick in the entire draft last year, which the Orioles had because of their performance from the year before. They got the first overall pick, and obviously last year wasn't, So anyway, they'll have some high picks here coming up as well. But Adley Rushman, Orioles were generous enough to send them our way for a few weeks at the end of the year, trying to help us in the playoff push. Unfortunately, we had an early exit from the playoffs, but 3-game series, it's not a lot of games to either win 2 or you go home. So unfortunately, lost 2 close games and went home after that. But it was on the field, great year. Fans were very excited. Renovations at the stadium are just about done. We put the deck in last year, which is a wildly popular hit amongst fans of all ages. This year is a couple of small projects with the press box, windows that are not functional. We're replacing those for us and other user groups, and a couple of small projects in the lobby area, the lobby bathrooms, getting those kind of tightened up. So other than that, the 5 years of renovations that we've had funding for in the past is kind of coming to a close. So those bonds, if there is any, those are done. The other thing I'll touch on, and I don't know if you guys have read about it, and I'll just take the offensive approach, is you may have read or seen, or however you want to say it, in the media and the news, talk about what's called the PBA. And so I don't know if anybody's seen this or has questions about that, but I'll answer that as best I can. We're not directly, meaning the Shorebirds, involved in that negotiation. If you can imagine, it's a negotiation between the federal government and the state government, but it could affect the local government, right? So basically, the way minor league baseball works is minor league baseball as an industry has a working agreement with Major League Baseball. That agreement is called the PBA for short, or the Professional Baseball Agreement. It's a binder in about 8 font. It's about that thick, and it really governs the rules and the relationship between the two industries. That agreement gets renewed every so often. The last major change to that agreement was in 1990. So there's been 30 years of, call it labor peace, but labor peace was a term you'd use in professional sports. There's been an agreement between minor league baseball and Major League Baseball for the last 100+ years, in some capacity, some shape or form. In 1990 is when the agreement really defined the levels of minor league baseball, AAA down to below us. It defined, having one affiliate, or the major league teams having one affiliate at each of those levels, because for other reasons before that, teams could have had 2 low A affiliates or 2 double A affiliates or whatever it may have been. So that agreement with Major League Baseball, that working agreement, has an expiration date of 2020. So after this baseball season, what's been out publicly, that again I'm not involved with, is the Major League Baseball has put forward a proposal that would eliminate 42 minor league teams. Thankfully, the Shorebirds aren't one of them, so we're safe. We're playing baseball this year, and if that proposal did get pushed through, there would be an elimination of 42 minor league teams to bring us from 160 collective minor league teams to 120. Clearly, there's lots of teams. There's 2 in the state of Maryland that are on the list of 42. There's lots of teams across the country. If you follow politics on the national level, you'll see lots of politicians, presidential candidates, and others being very vocal about this, because some of those folks were mayors of towns that brought a minor league team to their hometown, much like you folks did 25 years ago now. So there's a lot of pushback about it.
What are the 2 in Maryland?
So Hagerstown and Frederick are the 2 in Maryland that are on the list. This list does not necessarily have anything to do with the health of the business part of the team, or attendance or anything like that. It's really about location for travel and trying to reconfigure leagues and facilities. So the fact that we just did these renovations, I can assure you, our timing was impeccable, even though we didn't know the future. Our timing of all these things was impeccable too. I'm quite confident to keep us in a position. Our facility is well enjoyed. We have a great playing surface, and they don't care whether you have, they're not really concerned about the fan amenities. They're more concerned about the player amenities side of this. So we're safe. At the end of the day, minor league baseball, Major League Baseball are continuing to negotiate. This thing's a long way over. We're still in the first inning. Obviously, our goal as an industry, and if you've read up anything about it that we've came back with, is we want to keep all 160 teams that exist today tomorrow. There's a lot of towns that would not have, I forget, there's one state that has 4 or 5 teams that would not have any access to professional baseball at the major league level or minor level if this plan got pushed through. So there's a lot of folks out there. what I would say from a public standpoint is don't get too excited about what you read, much like probably politics, you know. While everybody's trying to probably write the facts, there's a lot of things that get said out there. Some of the things that are being mentioned or said aren't necessarily always accurate, so I'll just heed on that. And,
Are the Norfolk Tides safe?
yeah, so they'd be safe.
Well, that's good for Baltimore.
So it's really not even an individual major league team issue, like for us, like with Baltimore likes us. It's more of a governmental entities of Major League Baseball and minor league baseball, and it's being driven to do that. So I'm glad to answer any questions if you've read anything or have specific questions on it, but we're good for 2020 and we're good for the foreseeable future, but there are teams out there that potentially, if this got pushed through, would have some changes coming. So,
are we going to have a great season like last year?
Obviously, 90 wins was historic for us and any minor league franchise, and I would love to guarantee that we'll be sitting there again. I think and what people, if you come Thursday, will hear from Mike Elias is that the Orioles are really doing a good job of building from the bottom up. Right. In the Oriole system last year, Bowie made the playoffs, we made the playoffs, and Aberdeen, I think, was like a game away from making the playoffs. So realistically, and that's who feeds us, is the Aberdeen club from going from first grade to second grade. That's who's feeding us. So the fact that they are very talented should pose very well for us in Delmarva. So we should have a good club, lots of young, good prospects. And, you really saw some of the changes with the analytical side of things and some of the different things our guys are doing at the ballpark that I think is really helping as well. So.
All right, good.
Yeah,
Any more
Chris,
questions?
I would
Mr.
say, I
Campbell?
would want to add, Chris, that it's always a challenging decision on our part to try to make decisions on how we're going to invest in different areas of the county. And I think with what you've done with the stadium out there, it's really nice to see that we can have confidence in what your recommendations are with what you have done with the funds that were presented and the improvements that you've made, how it's made such a difference to the ballpark and for the community. So I want to thank you for the work that you did.
Well, I thank you very much for that. And
Sure.
Again, hopefully we're in a position to be successful moving forward for a long time now.
Yeah, and I want to make a quick comment as well. And also, I did want to note that the Eastern Shore Baseball Hall of Fame is located in the stadium. That's been a great partnership that we've all had for several years, and thank you very much for that. And I can remember 25 years ago when we had the public hearing here in the county whether we were going to, have a minor league baseball team in Wicomico County, and to this day, and I've attended a lot of public hearings, I still can't remember that many people attending a public hearing in favor of something. And the county had the wisdom to invest in the stadium, and I don't think anyone at that time dreamed, that it would have this kind of community involvement that you all, and through your leadership, have instilled in the community. This is just fabulous. Fabulous, the relationship Shorebirds have had with our local community, and it's just so many different social responsibility, tasks that you've all taken on, and no one, I think, envisioned that part of it, and it's just want to commend you, and congratulations on being the general manager of the year, and well deserved, and and all your other accolades.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate it. We enjoy being a part of the community. That's what makes what we do so fun, and we have to look to ways to give back and be engaged, because if without the community, we don't exist like any other entity. But we really take pride in trying to make sure we're very active. So thank you very much for the very kind comments.
Thank you.
So.
Go ahead, Mr. Hastings.
Mr. Hastings.
I would say real quickly that I still have my 1996 opening season program.
All right.
I saved it from including all the players. That was a big thing for me when I was 14, I guess, back then.
Right.
I love the new boardwalk. That was a fantastic season last year. It's been a long time since I had a season that good going out to the Shorebirds, and it was it was just really great. So thank you on that. I did have conversations with one of my good friends on Sunday, and of course he was mentioning the issue with the changes potentially to if the Shorebirds or others would be eliminated. He was also lamenting, we went to the first Good Beer Festival was held there, and we saw Fernando Guerrero when we were doing the boxing matches. We used to do Relay for Life. So I guess the question is the future there. Are we going to continue to see more? You mentioned a little bit of it there, but we're going to continue to see things like concerts or boxing matches or other kind of uses, public uses for the space.
Yeah, definitely. I think the renovations for, and like I said, it took longer than anticipated, but, just with how it all worked out, when it was about a 5-year from 2015 to now. So every fall, whether it was redoing the field or ripping out all the seats, the stadium to a certain degree had been unfunctional. And so we've, had to take a step back from those. But we'll continue to do as many community events as possible. That field is $700,000, so you have to watch what you do on it. And there's a lot more science to the field than just going to a park. There's sand layers, gravel layers, drainage. It's a lot more sophisticated than I ever thought. I try to be smart enough to know what I'm talking about, but I don't know the expertise. But absolutely do as many events as we can, and that's where we've really focused for the last couple of years on the baseball events, whether that be high school UMES games, high school games, and other types of events like that in partnership with the county. And how can we also assist tourism with any events they had with last year with baseball youth that came to the area. That was a new event. We've hosted USSSA at the stadium for opening ceremonies. The concerts and the Fernando sides of things, a lot of those are promoter-based events where we're here and open for business, whereas a lot of times, we're the facility and we're not the promoter. We're not in the boxing business or the concert business. So if somebody in the concert business or boxing business says, hey, we'd love to rent the facility, have you operate it, and we'll put on this event, we're all ears. But we're not necessarily in that type of business. But we're always looking at those things. And then you just got to run your risk-reward, analysis and what can you do to mitigate those, because, a concert can be easily, $100,000 to $200,000 in a production, and if you lose half of that, it's a little hard to swallow. So, but we're always looking for non-baseball events as well as community events that we can host. So for sure. But thank you,
Mr. Holloway.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Any more questions? Mr. Better, it was a great presentation, and I have to say that the Delmarva Shorebirds and that stadium is one of the best assets that Wicomico County has, and I'm glad to see that we had a great season last year and looking forward to a good season coming up.
It's a lot of fun.
I have one.
Oh, sorry, did I not give you one?
It's okay, I was looking at this.
Yeah, she was sharing
Oh,
mine.
my bad. I got plenty. I got a box of them here.
He was being stingy.
No,
Tight
no.
budget this year.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Enjoy the rest
I'll
of your
see you
meeting.
Thursday night.
See you Thursday.
Thanks, Chris.
Next on the agenda is Resolution Number 08-2020 SM, authorizing AD Myers Uniforms LLC as a sole source vendor for the purchase of uniforms for the Sheriff's Office and to waive the formal competitive bidding process for the purchase of said uniforms. This resolution does require 5 council members to vote in favor of it in order for it to pass. And we have Captain Todd Richardson here with the Sheriff's Office and Mr. Nick Rice, purchasing agent, if there are any questions.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve resolution number 08-2020?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Mr. Cannon with a second. Any discussion? Ms. Ackley,
Is
do
this?
you need to speak with? Can you guys come up?
Sorry.
Thought it would be a little easier than that. Can you name your names?
Good morning. Nicholas Rice, purchasing agent.
Morning, Captain Todd Richardson, Wicomico County Sheriff's Office.
Chris Taylor, Wicomico County Sheriff's Office.
Welcome.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Ackley.
I just wanted to defer to Mr. Rice to see what his thoughts are on this, if he's comfortable with it. I know you're the
Yes,
procurement manager.
yes,
so-
absolutely. They came to me with the request, which I then require them to submit some information in regards to what and why. And Mr. Taylor has gone through extensive research on these types of uniforms. I believe your previous vendor has now gone out of business, so that's why they're looking to change. And obviously, police uniforms are very specific.
Okay.
We've been with the current vendor for over 20 years, and they were bought out by a larger company who then became increasingly less reliable to deal with and harder to deal with, and colors and all these things became a major issue for us.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Where's this vendor located?
New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay. And is that where you're getting all your uniforms from?
Correct.
Okay.
He's sole source, only one that makes the color. One of the things, this was a custom color. Only the previous manufacturer made it, so I've been searching for 4 years to try to find somebody to take its place. There is no other, so we found the closest one, and it's only been in production for a year, and it's a 10-year contract, so we feel safe that it's going to be here a while.
Okay. Any more questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Next for your consideration is Resolution Number 09-2020 to make an appropriation of funds to the Sheriff's Office for unanticipated revenue in the amount of $124,075.21.
Do you have a motion to approve Resolution 09-2020?
So moved.
Got a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Davis had the second. Any discussion?
I guess I have one. The funding that you're going to, $25,000 in capital improvements, what is that for?
It's for some technical equipment for our criminal investigation division.
Okay, we can't talk about some of it.
I
So
sent
do
out
we-
an email. I'm sorry it was late.
That's fine.
Friday's events were overwhelming,
So it'll be movable to use to the new office when the new office is built, correct?
No, this is for equipment. This is capital other, which is specific capital equipment over a capital cost.
Okay.
All right. Any more questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. President, that's all I have.
Okay, that's all we have. Now it's time for public comments. If you could, leave your comments at 3 seconds. Yes, ma'am? Go to the podium, please. Did I say 3
3
seconds?
minutes.
3 minutes.
3 seconds is good.
Quick.
too.
That'll work for most everybody.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead and state your name and your county of residence.
My name is Loretta Adkins. I live on Dagsboro Road in Delmar, Maryland. I have lived in Wicomico County over 32 years. I was born and raised on farmland in Maryland, and I currently own a farm. Lewis and Quint Riley currently farm my land for me. The reason I'm here today is about the application of chicken guts applied to the farm fields in Wicomico County. And I speak on behalf of 23 disgusted tax-paying Wicomico County residents, which I will give this copy to Mr. Dodd. I have spoken to Joe Holloway, a friend and representative for my district, who has driven by my home and smelled the horrific smell in the area. Mr. Holloway was able to go home and not have to live with this. Bob Culver has been quoted in the newspaper as describing the field that he went to as, quote, smelling like hell, unquote. However, Mr. Culver was able to leave and go home and not have to deal with the smell. In the recent article in the Salisbury Independent from this month, Mr. Culver is quoted as, "We're working to improve our quality of life." Well, we have no quality of life in Dagsboro, Brown, and Zion Road. We cannot go outside and breathe the air. We cannot have a picnic and invite friends over. We cannot tend to our gardens. We cannot mow the grass. We have had to live with these conditions for over 7 weeks straight with no escaping this horrible, horrible smell. I have even tried to sleep in my concrete floored basement to get away from the smell, and that also did not work. Yes, the application of chicken guts is governed by a Maryland regulation. However, because of the personal health and air and water quality issues that are affecting the residents here in Wicomico County, which you represent, it is your duty and responsibility to forward our complaint in writing to the Governor Larry Hogan and to the Maryland Department of Agriculture on your letterhead demanding that the application of chicken guts cease. I would also like to receive a copy of the letter that you will send to them. So I'll give to Mr. Dodd of the 23 neighbors. These neighbors, for the most part, live on Dagsboro, Brown, and Zion Road. The fields that were dumped with chicken guts are to the north side of my property, to the west side of my property, and to the south side of my property. And I believe that this just needs to stop. There's no reason, if it were beside your house, you would not put up with it. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Atkins.
Thank you.
Any more public comments? Mr. McDermott.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the council, good morning. My name is Billy McDermott. I'm the Deputy State's Attorney here in Wicomico County. I joined you this morning just to give you an update, understanding we left the last open session and the council had requested that we meet with your attorney, Mr. Taylor, and also to review some of the concerns that were raised during that hearing. We have had an opportunity to do that since our last visit with you. We've certainly enjoyed engaging in the democratic process. Myself, Madam State's Attorney Jamie Dykes, who joins us this morning as well, have had an opportunity to meet with several members of the community, interested parties. We've done that both in person as well as over the phone and through email. We haven't had a chance until this morning to coordinate with your attorney, Mr. Taylor. That was just a conflict in schedules, but we were able to speak moments ago out in the hallway. Mr. Taylor was able to express some of his concerns to us. We have since heard those concerns. He asked us to request an Attorney General's opinion on this particular ordinance. Just moments ago, I was able to email the Attorney General's office to kind of get that ball rolling on that particular process. One of the things that we were able to do, however, was draft a letter that we submitted to the council yesterday. We gave that to Ms. Hurley. I also have copies of it as well if you would like physical copies this morning. In that letter, you'll find some of our attempts to address certain concerns, but in particular, one of the more interesting meetings that we had was with Mr. Darby, who is also present. He is the CEO of Peninsula Alternative Medicine. Is it medicine or health? One of the marijuana dispensaries located here in Salisbury. He gave myself, Ms. Dykes, along with the sheriff and Chief Duncan, a tour of his facility. In cooperation with him, we were able to address particularly his concern and perhaps the larger medical marijuana community's concern with the definition of consume. Because I think, Councilman, to your point, the last time we met, there was some concern that the definition of consumption would prohibit the application of certain, say, topical medications that certain patients needed to alleviate their medical conditions. That was a very good point that you raised. It was certainly echoed by Mr. Darby, and so we have changed the word consume, or at least proposed the change the word consume to smoke. I will, in all candor, address Mr. Taylor's point, which he raised a moment ago, which is that the state statute uses the word use, which is in particular what we're going to be seeking an Attorney General's opinion on. While I haven't had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Taylor about that particular point, I would note, just in sitting here, I'm thinking about the other local jurisdictions that have banned smoking cigarettes in public, even though cigarette smoking is a completely legal function, and no one can be charged with a crime with smoking cigarettes. So as we kind of work through those issues, we've enjoyed this process. We'll continue to answer any concerns you have and or complete any tasks that you may want us to do as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott.
Thank you.
Any more public comments?
My name is Cindy Doherty. I live on Porter Mill Road in Hebron, Wicomico County, Maryland. I just want to thank the county for going through with the moratorium on that tank. I know we're not here as often as we were at the beginning, but that does not mean that we're not following and listening. And we've taken this opportunity or this time to try to educate ourselves more about the product itself and how the tank came into being. I listened to Ms. Atkins, and I've talked to her, and I've talked to her neighbors, and that's part of our education process, because you cannot separate the tank from what is going into the tank. So I've been out in some of the neighborhoods, and I've talked to the people and listened to some of their horror stories. I heard one man talk about, well, when he first smelled it, he thought something had died under his deck, and he actually tore off part of his deck to look to see what the smell was coming from. I've talked to another lady who talks about finding maggots underneath her floor mats and having to put pest strips. So it's not just the smell, it is the flies that are part of the problem in some locations. And this is never, ever meant to be against the poultry industry. It was never meant to be against the rendering company. Those are all vital Delmarva chickens feed the world, and they provide for good employment for this area. It's not been about that. It's not against the farming practice itself or the farming community. These people have called and called and called the Department of Agriculture. They've called the executive office, the health department, even the EPA. And I used to wonder when I would go by these fields, well, why haven't they done something about it? And they have tried to. They have called different people to get a response. And then sometimes someone from the Department of Agriculture will actually go to these fields and they will look and they say, well, this farmer is not in violation of their nutrient plan. Well, if you have a product that doesn't have very much nutrient in it, you can just about put enough of the product on the field to float a boat, and you will not be in violation of your nutrient plan. This is not so much, we do not believe that this is not so much a farming practice as a way to get rid of waste. And most of the people I talk to think that, well, the farmer needs to put it on, it's a fertilizer. It's not a fertilizer. It doesn't have very much nutrients in it. They call it a soil amendment. Well, how bad is the soil in this county where you have to spread it day and night in the spring and day and night in the fall? I know that this is beyond your scope, but what we need, because when Ms. Atkins calls, or when I call, or one of the other neighbors, it's one person. And what I have heard from time and time again is they get bounced around from one department to another department. And if we had advocacy, and I think you all have done that, but we need someone who in a position to do something about it, to, instead of just writing a letter saying, I understand your frustration, here's a number to the Department of Agriculture, to be an advocate for us. And I understand that, and you all have done that for us. I appreciate that, but you're not the only person that can do that for us. This product can be spread where it is not as much of a nuisance. I go on Log Cabin Road, and on one end of it, it is spread, and it's not that bad. On the other end of it, there are people who are canceling their doctor's appointment because they don't want to go outside just to get from their house to the car. And they talk about, the lights coming in through the windows, they can't sleep at night, they can't do anything outside. That's on one road, where on one end of it, it's okay, but on the other end, it's more of a dumping ground. And I will applaud the representative who came down and looked at it herself. But if a farmer can have an elected official in the cab of their tractor and spreading it on a field where it is not that bad, it can be spread that way for everyone, whether they're in Chapel Branch, whether they're on Sneatham Church Road, whether they're on Rockawalken, whether they're on Dagsboro or Brown Road. These people need to be able to breathe and not be offended. I've heard people talk about the flies being so bad that it is like a biblical plague, that it gets in their nose. They have to, it gets in their cars, it gets in their homes. And that being said, and I know that you are looking to, through this moratorium, see how, best to make this a safe place to put a tank. And none of us ever said, you can't have a tank. We're just saying you can't put it right here. So what maybe you can consider are a buffer zone. How far away can a tank be from a community? How far will the proposed tank be from your house? 400 yards. We have people closer than that. Or not just that, but even if this process, even if this tank had to go through and get a special exemption where there had been some advertising that it was going to be there and the public had the neighbors had some influence as to whether or not it could be built there, I can almost guarantee you there would have been enough public outcry that it would not have gotten the permit that it did. So if it required a special exemption, that wouldn't say you can't have it, but it would say that you can't have it around people that it's going to hurt. So if you could determine a buffer zone, or even that this thing has to go through a special exemption, they can't just get a regular building permit to do it, that just proves that it's structurally sound. Those would be two things that we would consider possible solutions. Again, it's not against rendering. Goodness, I can't imagine what this place would be like if we did not have that, or the chickens, or the farming industry. And it's not meant to pit neighbor against farmer. We just didn't want it close by where we would have to endure the traffic, the smell, the flies. I mean, she has a garden. She doesn't need flies from a tank, open storage tank, landing on that and then landing on things she's going to eat. I have a garden. My neighbor across the street has there's one down the road that has gardens. That should be a public health concern. Having an open 3 million gallon tank put where people grow food. Now, on Dagsboro Road, they don't have a problem with flies so much. But on Chapel Branch, they do. And on the end of Porter Mill, they sure do. But nobody's discussed that and part of it is because what goes in the tank is different with every load. It's not like a fertilizer where you can say it's going to be 10% phosphorus, so much nitrogen, so much potassium. It depends on where the source is. And if it's coming from Valley Protein, how is that not a waste product instead of a agricultural? But anyway, I can go on and on. Most people that know me do not think of me as emotional or hysterical. I don't think Mr. Davis would ever call me emotional or hysterical. I'm pretty low-keyed, but this bothers me. This is affecting my life. I'm paying thousands of dollars. Myself and my neighbors are paying thousands of dollars for an attorney to try to keep what we should never have lost. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Sir, you're more than welcome to go to the podium and make your voice heard. Okay, you don't want to be on record? Okay, thank you for attending. Do we have any more comments? Any more public comments? Last call. Council comments. Mr. Hastings.
First of all, I'll say on the issue with Mardella, let me speak up on that first. I'm a proud Mardella graduate. I'm wearing my green and gold here. That's a tight community. You know, we got Mr. Robinson in the back that actually he was my T-ball coach 35 years ago. There's a lot of folks there who you know, for a long time they've been talking about when are we going to get a new school? When is it going to be upgraded? You know, 20 years ago when I was walking around Mardella, there were still buckets there collecting rainwater. I'm now planning my 20th year anniversary of high school reunion.
I thought you were younger than that.
I try. So one way or another, if there's ways that we can continue to advance Mardella Middle and High School, I think that's all of us should try to come together to try to do that, because this is a community that deserves it. Next things I'll say is just on the issue, of course, the issue of the marijuana. It's good to hear the legislation that, well, I shall say I've gotten a lot of calls and a ton of calls and emails and folks visiting my place of employment to say how much of an issue that they think this could be. I think whether it not being legal or having a lot of other unintended consequences. So I'm glad to hear that there's been a little bit of education, a little bit of more back and forth discussion. I think where we are headed as a community and a society is probably not where that legislation was, the draft legislation was written and what was passed in Fruitland. So I want to continue to make sure that we're finding common ground if that legislation does move forward. And the last thing I'll say, of course, I went to the Martin Luther King Jr. banquet last night. That was a wonderful event. It always is every year. And it was great to see most all the council members were here. Councilman Davis did a wonderful job speaking on behalf of of the council. So I just want to say to the organizers and the folks who put that on, thank you for doing a great job. 35 years, congratulations. And thank you.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes. I'd like to thank the residents of Michelle Wright and the residents of Mardella for speaking out about the school system there and what their requests are. I understand their frustration. I can empathize with them as far as at one point in time thinking that all of a sudden they have a project that's green lighted and then the next minute it's all of a sudden taken away. I don't understand it. We'll have discussions in the work session later as to why a project that was just a year ago looked like it was moving forward and now it's been completely erased for the next 5 years. I can understand if it had been pushed down a year or 2 years, but to have it completely erased for the next 5 years, I don't understand that, especially in light of the fact that in that same CIP, there is mention of state funding, I believe maybe next year or the year after. And I think everyone at this table knows you just can't assume there's state funding, and why would it be in the CIP if you don't have a local commitment? It doesn't make sense, but hopefully we'll work through that in the work session today. But I appreciate them taking the time to be here today to express that. And Dr. Hanlon's pointing out to the council of the monies that were available through either cost savings from other schools or prior CIPs or that overfunded, letting us know that's available so that we can apply that towards another school for another opportunity. Also attended the Martin Luther King Jr. banquet with most everyone here. Ernie did a good job for us, represented us well on the stage there. A very good event, as is always the case. And also attended Spencer Wiersberg's funeral as well, which I think was, our hearts go out to his family and his friends and all the agencies that he was associated with, because he was an excellent individual, an excellent officer. It was a very great tribute in honor of his memory. And again, our hearts do go out to the Wiersberg family. Outside that, that's about it, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Ms. Ackley.
I want to first let the citizens that are here to speak on behalf of the DAF moratorium, that you are being heard, that we're listening, and hopefully we'll be formulating a plan to move forward. I had the honor of visiting the Christian shelter in Salisbury this week. It's very interesting what they're doing, and I encourage everyone to get out and see it, how they're engaging the community. I've received many of phone calls, emails from parents and citizens of Mardella regarding their school. And I think, I feel strongly the council, the county executive, the school board, Mr. Stauffer will answer all my questions, and we will work through this. I don't think that, I think that the CIP is a working document, and we just all need to keep an open mind moving forward.
Mr. McCain, do you have anything?
A couple comments. I'll start off regarding Mardella. I appreciate the people that came and made their comments. I can just say, I 100% support finding a solution to this and getting Mardella in the CIP. It can be done, and we can work through this, and hopefully we'll make some strides today in that direction. And also regarding, Ms. Darby, your comments, and Ms. Atkins, and, Ms. Robinson back there. We have this moratorium, but I guess I'm almost directed to us as well. We need to have our work session on this because I think it's important for us to do this as soon as we can because with the state legislators in session now, this might be something that has to be done in concert with them, so we don't want to miss out on that opportunity. So I think we need to start discussing where do we go from here. This is a problem for our county. It needs to be addressed, and there certainly does need to be regulatory parameters that surround this. And so we need to move forward. And lastly, I'll just actually make a quick personal note. Yesterday was my 30th wedding anniversary, so I was pretty lucky. I've got a great wife, Teresa, and looking forward to 30 more.
Wow.
Hopefully.
You married up, right?
Oh, I married up, definitely.
I joined that club too.
Yeah, that was pretty easy for me to marry up.
Mr. Davis.
Again, I echo what they say about Mardella. I am the councilman that is on the building commission for the school board, and it is disheartening when you're sitting there and you're planning for the future, then you find out that one of the projects is snatched from under you. And as they mentioned earlier, there is funding out there like we did before when he snatched it out. He found funding to put it back in the budget, so I think there is money out there that we need to find to put back in there. That school is in dire need. I'm not in that district, but I'm right up to it, and matter of fact, I got buses that pick up in that district, so that school is in dire need. I mean, it should be put back in the CIP.
Mr. Holloway.
Yes, I did have the opportunity on Saturday night to attend the awards banquet at Pittsville Volunteer Fire Department, and they had a great turnout, and the county executive swore in the new officers, and as usual, they had a good time. We got to meet a lot of the folks on that side of the county. Mrs. Atkins, you kind of wonder sometimes why people do things that they do. But we knew that the folks were having the issues on the west side with not only the tank and the spreading of the DAF. And this company, for whatever reason, decided to go over within about 1.25 miles of the Maryland State Police Barracks on Dagsboro Road with hundreds of homes within a few hundred feet and distribute this. And I know it was warm weather. It was unusually warm for that time of year. But she called me. I went over, and I would say that it was really bad. The poultry industry probably needs to find a better way to go about doing what they're doing with this. Well, probably is not the right word. They need to find a better way. When you can't go outside your house, we've all dealt with chicken manure, and I think everybody realizes that's part of the process. And over the number of years, I always said chicken manure smelled like money, and that proved that we were doing, our industry was strong. But this isn't chicken manure; it's a different product, and they need to find a better way to take care of this issue. And for them to go over there and do that, I think was asking for trouble, really. I did go to Officer Wurzburg's funeral. It was an outpouring of love and support for that family. I don't think I've been to a service in a long time that there were that many people. As far as the school goes, I was looking over the capital improvement budget, this morning, and then we had some answers from Dr. Hanlon about some money available, and I see the airport, they're getting ready to spend, $30-some million in the next 5 years on the airport, on the capital improvement budget. Sounds pretty aggressive. I support the airport, as far as being an economic driver of the county, but there probably should be some pacing done and supporting some of the other projects that maybe need to be done sooner. So I think the council and working with the county executive, maybe we can get this put back on the agenda, or in the budget, excuse me. That's all.
Thank you. Under presidential comments, thank you. Happy anniversary to Bill and Teresa.
Thank you.
Hope you see 30 more years.
I hope so.
Seems like a lifetime, doesn't it? We had a very busy week. I'm not going to mention everything. Attended the Tri-County Council Water and Sewer Committee meeting last week. We got a lot of work to do on that because most of you know that Wicomico County has water and sewer issues. So that is a regional work in progress. Also attended Wednesday night the Tri-County Council Executive Board meeting. Thank you, Mr. Hastings, for attending, and the rest of the council members are more than welcome to attend. Earlier that day, Ms. Hurley and I attended Mako all day long. It seems like a long day, then go to the Tri-County Council meeting. And I think it was Thursday or Friday, we attended the joint chamber function. Thank you, Mr. Chambers, for putting that on. Peter Francho was there. We were at the Somerset County CTE building. It's a beautiful building. They got a nice building that's going to last a lifetime, our lifetime anyway. I also attended the meeting at Pittsfield, or their banquet, and we gave Jason Miller a 20-year recognition, and it was it's a great opportunity to see these volunteers put all this time in many years, because they do it for free. So he was recognized for his 20 years of service. And I want to thank Councilman Davis for representing Wicomico County last night at the 35th anniversary of the Martin Luther King event celebration. There was a lot of people there. So, any more comments?
Yeah, I do have one.
Mr.
We
Holloway.
are having an open work session after lunch on that DAF tank, if anybody's interested in being here for that.
That is correct. And I did want to thank everybody that comes to the podium and speaks out. And I appreciate the fact that you recognize that there's a lot of things that we can't do as a body, but we will advocate for you. So thank you very much for those ideas and voicing your opinion. That venue is always there for you to be heard. So thank you for coming up. Now, in order to adjourn from legislative session to go into open work session, followed by a closed work session pursuant to the general provisions of Article Section 3-305B7 to consult with legal counsel to protect attorney-client privilege. Do I have a motion going? Do we need a motion for this? I need a motion. Got a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. It's time for lunch, and we'll be back in 30 minutes. Is that okay?